Okay, so let me share my screen. I have quite a number of use cases and examples that are on the YouTube channel already. I'm going to continue creating free content, doing sessions like these, and at the same time maintaining my Udemy course. So whichever works for you, whichever route you want to go. Let me just make my fonts a little bit bigger. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
I can see it.
Is it readable now?
Mine's readable and I'm on a Dell laptop. That screen is, I mean, so it's tiny.
Okay, yeah. Well, for people who are just starting on Flows, let me just give you an overview what we have here. So when you go to your setup, right, you go to your gear icon or cog or whatever you want to call it, and then you start typing Flow here. You're going to go to the Flow Builder, and this is right now a preview org. So this is on Winter 22. You are going to see Winter 22 functionality. So when you click on New on your Flow screen, you are presented with a couple of options. And one of the most important decisions that you are going to make is which type of flow do I want to create? Now we have Screenflow, record triggered flow, schedule triggered flow, platform event triggered flow, and auto launch flow. Now, platform event is a little bit more of an advanced concept, and I have an example on my YouTube channel. If you're interested, please go there. I'm not going to go into the details of that right now. It doesn't apply to most people when they are trying to do things on Flow. The way you differentiate the options here, like if you are going to do anything on screen, if you are going to ask the user, enter information, review information, if you are going to present a message to them on screen, you are going to use Screenflow. All the other options, when you go that route, you are not able to show anything to the user on screen. So that's how you know you need a Screenflow. Record triggered flow is the corresponding functionality to workflow rules and process builders. So these will trigger whenever a record is either updated, created, updated, or created. You can actually choose that option, or you can trigger this one also on delete. And there are two options here. We can do before save flows and after save flows. So, and this screen, the way we do before and after save flows changed. That's the biggest change in Winter 22. It's actually a cosmetic change, but it's an important change. The functionality is not changing, but if you have been building record triggered flows, this could be confusing for you initially. So now, well, before, when we clicked on that button, we would directly go to the canvas and we would click on the start element and choose whether we want a before save flow or after save flow. Now, what we are going to do here is all these various options are brought together on one single screen. Now we select the object we want to trigger this record trigger on, and then we can change all the different options about created, updated, and deleted. We can obviously do entry conditions when we want to trigger this flow, and the verbiage here changed. You see that before and after save is not in focus. Now this is an attempt to help people choose between before save and after save, because it can get complicated. So before save side is the left side. It's called fast field updates, and after save is the right side, actions and related records. By the way, you can stop me anytime, ask me questions. If we get off track too long, then I can defer the questions for later. That's fine.
I do have a question.
Yes.
So if you are used to using workflow rules and have been afraid of flow, and you were just trying to replace a workflow rule with a flow, then it would be the one that you have highlighted now. If you want it to run, like after I update a field and I hit save, it's actions and related records.
Oh,
Or
okay.
would it,
Yeah,
like, I'm trying to correlate what that would be.
let me help you with that. First of all, workflow rules and process builders, they run after save. So in terms of functionality and where the flow runs and workflow builder and process builder runs in the order of execution, this is where, you know, that's happening. So this is the corresponding one. But the reason is you don't really get that option, right? This option in Flow is fantastic. It's very efficient. It's super fast because workflow rules and process builders are essentially updates on the same record. Most of the stuff that you're doing over there can come over here. So, and the differentiation between this choice and this one over here is that if you are updating the same record that triggered the flow, like let's say you want to trigger based on an account update, right? You know, when somebody updates a field on the account, you want to trigger and update another field on the account. So it's the same object record we're talking about. Then you can definitely do fast field updates. And the cool part of fast field updates is this is a before save record triggered flow, and before save record triggered flows actually trigger even before Apex triggers. So they are super efficient, super fast, and that's why they are recommending that you make the switch to Flow. This is not available on the workflow side or on the process builder side.
And I can see why that might be good, because if you use that and you updated your record, you sometimes things don't fire. And this would stop that from happening. It would, like, you know, when you update a record and you're like, well, it's updated, why didn't this get triggered?
Yeah, well,
see this fixing that.
Yeah, I mean, if you should definitely watch some of my record triggered flow videos, and I will do different sessions also on record triggered flows. You can join those because today we're going to do Screenflows. But the main difference about whether it's triggering or not triggering is we can now debug record triggered flows in Flow Builder, and Process Builder is kind of trying to build blindfolded. I mean, you don't know what's happening until it works. You just try to fiddle, and you know you're trying to get this to work. I mean, once you get used to this, it's much better. So let's go back to the other flow types very quick. Okay, scheduled triggered flow is when you want to trigger flows based on a predetermined schedule, which is date and time. And you can set up a recurring schedule for this. You can run something daily. But this is when you say, okay, well, I want to run this flow. For example, right now it's the 11th of September, and then, you know, I want to run a flow on the 14th of September at 11 p.m. So that's what this will do. Now, this often gets confused with scheduled path. There is a scheduled path option under record triggered flow, which says when the account record is updated, I want to do all these actions, and 5 hours later, or, you know, a day later, I want to do another action. That's called scheduled path. Scheduled path cannot trigger based on date and time like scheduled triggered flows do. So, you know, whenever you're talking about triggering something on Saturday at 10 p.m. or something, then you're talking about scheduled triggered flows. And the auto launch flows are the flows that actually that can be triggered using various different methods, and they execute in the background. So they cannot show you any message, they cannot show you any confirmation, but they are going to execute, and you can invoke them by Apex. You can invoke them using Process Builder, REST API, and etc. So that's your behind the scenes automation. So any questions so far?
Are scheduled flows still only available for daily and weekly, but not, you don't have the flexibility of scheduling them at different intervals?
It's daily and weekly, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
What schedule did you want to do?
A quarterly and monthly is the ones that I would have, in a perfect world, like to have added. Everything has its limits, but that's just me.
Yeah, well, the way people work around that is they actually have a date field on the record itself, or they have a checkbox on the record itself that's actually updated based on the date or something, and then they run the flow weekly, and then that checks that.
Okay.
And then that's the entry condition, entry criteria. It's a workaround. It's not great, but that's how they work around these issues. Like if they want to do every 3 days or 4 days on a certain date, something like that.
Okay.
But I have to also, that's one area that's an area of concern for many people with scheduled actions. Apparently, there is a maximum number of outstanding scheduled actions that you can have in Flow. I don't remember the number now. And workflow is that does not have that limit. So that's one area that people are criticizing when they are doing extensive scheduled actions. Then they are saying, I can't really give up workflows because I have this upper limit here, and that's going to be addressed sooner or later, I'm sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So today what we are going to do is we are going to do scheduled flows, and no, we are going to do Screenflows, right? And like I said, I have many use cases where I created several videos, and I also ask the people who are following me, what kind of use cases are you interested, you want me to show? And, recently, they told me that they are interested in flows that update the public groups. So they want to find out whether I can create a flow that can add the user to a public group, right? So for those of you who don't use public groups that much, the functionality can be used in several areas. For example, you can have a list view that actually that can be assigned with a public group. Let me just find you. Where did I want the service console. Let me just go to sales. I think I've done this on leads. Oh, it's not here. So, I mean, what you can do here is when you're creating a new list view, and you want to filter based on conditions, when you say, I want to share this list view with a group of users, you can actually choose a public group that you want to share your list view with. When you're narrowing down your records that you want to show in your list view, you can have, for example, a list view where the city is a certain city, right? And you want a public group, your colleagues, to be able to see this list view of all opportunities, right? In this case, all leads in New York. Apparently, we don't have a lead in New York, so let me just change one of them. New York, Florida is an interesting one, but so when you go to your list view one custom, then it is going to show only the lead that's actually in New York. And this list view can be shared with your public group. Another way you can use public groups is you can actually share certain records. For example, in your account teams or in your opportunity teams, you can use public groups to share certain records with your public groups. And the public groups are set up and used in your setup. When you go to your public groups here, these are essentially records. We have Gators and Jaguars here. So you can see the users that are in your public group, and you can add users to your public group using this functionality. So for example, let's remove Harvey Dent from this public group. And that means whenever a record is assigned to Gators, they are not going to see that anymore. And account teams is a functionality that you can activate in your settings again. And once you activate the account teams, your account teams are going to be visible, and you can assign your records to account teams now in your Salesforce interface. Let me just close this one. So you can see the sharing here in your accounts. So you can see that it is shared with a user in with full access and read-write access and so on. So if you go to your flows, let's say we want to set up a flow to add users to the account teams. Let me just go to my flow. Let me just go to my old flows here. That's modified. So the flow is called here user group assignment Screenflow. So what this flow does is it will assign a user to a public group. So let me just run this one for you in debug. So we get actually a screen as the first screen in our flow, and this screen is going to ask us which user we want to add to which public group, right? So we have users here on the left side that are listed. These are all users that are standard users in our Salesforce org. So we can select one of these users and we can decide to add these to one of the public groups. So we have two public groups available, and these public groups are called Gators and Jaguars. So we can select one of these. I just removed Harvey Dent from Gators. So, you know, when I click next, I'm going to see that there's a success message that's displayed on the screen. Let me just make my screen a little bit bigger again. And it says the user was added to the group. And on the right side, you will see this is the interaction. This is the interface that you don't have with Process Builder and the other automation tools. I mean, you can't do screen stuff over there anyway. Screenflows is a unique functionality on the flow side that was originally created to do scripting for call center agents. So whenever you have support people, call center agents, and you want them to read certain text to the customers and clients, and review some information, and at the same time update some information, you can actually set up screen dialogues. So on the right side, you will see that a screen was run, and on the screen, the user selected a choice. On the user side, Harvey Dent was selected, and the user ID for Harvey Dent is captured. And on the right side, Gators was selected as the public group. The public group ID was captured. And then we created a record. Actually, public group membership, in fact, is a record that combines, that links the user with the public group record. So, and we are creating that record here, and we are assigning to group ID and the user ID to the record, and the transaction commits. So when we go back to our setup and check our public groups, we are going to see that Harvey Dent is added back to the public group. So any questions so far about the use case?
My only question is, when would you ever use that as opposed to just going into setup and doing it? But it makes sense.
That's a good question. Now,
I mean, the flow makes sense, but I don't know when I would use it.
that's a good question. The reason why we are doing this is there are several different ways you can deploy this flow. You can actually put this on your UI, user interface, inside Salesforce, and then you can trigger it. And that's why I actually did this use case, so that I can show the various different deployment methods that we can do this with. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not that much different than doing it here, but it is going to be, for example, I asked this question. I said, if there was a flow like this one, where would you want to use this functionality? Where should it be deployed, launched? So this is the discussion that we are going to have today. And the suggestion was that, I mean, there was an interesting one I didn't think of. Somebody said, in our org, we have actually a Lightning app, a console just for admins. And on that one, we combine things like that, like we actually put everything together, and then we go right there to make changes on user configurations and things like that.
And guide you through it.
Yeah, that would be one of them. So I can show you that one here, actually. Let me just see. Where did I?
I didn't mean to send you down a rabbit hole.
No problem. I'm just trying to. I added the button somewhere. Now I can't remember. I prepared for this one a few days before. Now I'll show you though in a second where we can deploy this. This is an important discussion. But here I can show you, for example, the example that I just mentioned. Sales console. So one area you can deploy something like this is right here. So in your Lightning app configuration, you have actually something called a utility bar, right? In your utility bar, you are able to launch a flow. So the advantage of this one is it's always docked over here, right? So if your user is a flow user and they have the the access and the authority to be able to run this flow and complete it, then they can click on this one and then complete this one. That's another thing about flows. For example, if the user's current access level is not allowing them to do a transaction like this, actually you are able to change the context of the flow execution to system without sharing. And if you do that, even if they don't have access to the setup screens where this is done, they can complete the transaction here. But they can only do the things that Flow is designed to do. So you can narrow it down that way. The cool thing about this is always that here for it to be used. And the downside of this deployment is this utility bar does not know what's happening on the rest of the screen. So it just feels like, when I have an account open here, and I launch this one, this should be able to launch on that account record, for example. It doesn't work that way. So this is independent. But when I go launch it on my utility bar, I can see now the interaction over here, and I can quickly, if I'm on the record, and I know this record is shared with the public group, but I want to add another user to this public group so that they can see it, then I can do it right here. And this person was added to the public group. Now the flow is a little bit simplified. It doesn't check whether that person is already in that public group or not. So that would be one area that this flow can be improved, obviously. So and another way we can deploy this is using a button. So that's also another area where we can deploy this. Let me just go through the flow. Where is my flow screen? So there are a couple of Winter 22 functionality items here that I want to show you. That's pretty cool. For example, here, I'll show you right here. In our final screen, when we have the finish button here on the bottom, we didn't used to be able to change what's written on the button. It was, we only had the next, previous, pause, and depending on whether you are on the last screen or not, next becomes finish, I think. So now we can change the labels on these buttons, which is pretty cool. So this one says thank you, and you can change these to whatever you like right here. So when you say, I want to use a custom label for next and finish, you can just say, go ahead. And then that's done. So let's see how we can deploy this one, for example, on a button on the record. That would be an example of deployment area. So when you go to your object manager, and let's say you want to deploy this one on the account, right? You have your button links and actions. So under your button links and actions, you can actually create a new action for this flow to be added to your page layout. So in your accounts, like when you pull up an account record, you are going to see a button that's going to launch that flow for you. So here we have an add user to team just a second. So here we have an add user to team action that can be associated with the flow that's active, that needs to be a screen flow, which is our flow user group assignment screen flow version 1. So then add user to team action is added, and this action can be used on the page layout. So when you go to your account layout, you can add it to your page layout, and in which case, when you go to your account record, is it right? I think it doesn't show up in this console. You know how page layouts are. Accounts. They are dependent on the Lightning application you are on. Ah, okay.
Things on the left.
It's displayed. Yeah, well, it looks like I've done it 2 times now. Yeah, I have 2 buttons. Now add user to team, and then there's an assign user when I was doing it, I guess, before to prepare. So they are launching actually the same flow. So this would be an area, to answer your question, why would we do this on a flow? Like you are on this account record, and this account record is shared with the Gators team, but you want to add your colleague to the Gators team so that they can see it. So you would go here and you would choose, I want to add the security user to Gators, and success, the user was added to the group. So that would be another area where you could run this flow to add them to the public group. So how is this done? Let's learn how the screen flows are done a little bit. let me just look up something here. Result equal standards. So let me just quickly create another one with you so that you'll see the steps, because it's quite important that you see how it's done. So when I go to Screenflows, I get two options, free form and auto layout form, right? And I'm going to use auto layout, so it's a little bit less cumbersome. The way it works is a little bit different. If you're used to the other format, free form, you can continue using that. The main difference is when we are using free form, we get actually the elements here on the left side, and we need to drag them onto the canvas. And here we get a start and end element. And when we want to add elements, we actually click here on the right side on the canvas and then add them from this dialog with a plus sign. So the only flow type where we are going to see a screen element is going to be a screen flow. So that in the other types of flows, you are not going to see a screen element at all. So often when we are dealing with screen flows, we need to also understand the concept of variables. That's sometimes difficult for non-programmers to understand. So variables are containers where we are keeping certain field values or certain entries that the user provides on the screen so that we can use them later. So sometimes we ask the user to enter information on the screen or do a pick list choice or like a radio button choice, and we need to remember that choice so that we can later use in our flow for a certain purpose. So those are kept in variables, and you can think of them as containers. So in our flow, our first screen is going to be a screen, let's call this one selection screen. So the API name is assigned automatically. Configure header and configure footer is over here. So we often hide the footer, the header here, because the header comes automatically from the element name, and it's often something that's not very understandable to the user. So now here we can customize our buttons. We can decide whether we want to show footer or not. This is new functionality that actually came in the last release that I used over here. I can now create sections I was not able to before that can be configured in columns. So I can put 2 or 3 columns here where I can place my fields. So I'm going to create 2 columns, and I'm going to add here on the left side the user selection. And the user selection is going to be a radio button. So I'm going to call this one user. And with choice components, we can select now, this is also a recent developments, right? Inside the choice component, we can change back and forth between radio buttons and pick lists. We used to have to delete one and then, pick the other one from the left side beforehand. Now the change up between the two types is much simpler. Now we need to tell the flow what are going to be the available choices for that pick list. When I click on this one, I need to create the choices as a resource, which I could have done prior here on the left side, or I can just do right now. And there are 3 options here. Choice can be static, choice can be a record choice set, pick list choice set. In this case, I want to query the records and then get all the records that match a certain criteria, and I want to present them as options. So I'm going to call this one user record choice set. And I want to query the user object. And I can define conditions to narrow down the options here. And I think there was a user type, or what was it called? User type. And I want the user type to be standard. I can sort the choices. I can tell Salesforce how many maximum choices are possible. And I can configure the choice label. This means I will choose from the record which field is going to be displayed on the screen as the choice label. This is going to be the name of the user. And I need to also pick what Salesforce will remember as a variable value, for example, like, what to keep in the container for me to use later, right? I don't want to use the name because when I'm assigning values to records, I need the IDs. So this is going to be data type text, and I want the ID of the user for me to use later. And this is also recent enhancement. Now we can decide on the same screen what other field values to capture and save and keep in the container for me to use later. I don't need anything else. That's all I need. So I'm going to say done. So the user record choice set is created and is already assigned over here on this field. Any questions so far? Did I lose everybody?
I'm still here.
Okay.
I don't have any questions though.
Okay.
I
So
don't even,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just saying I don't have any questions either. I'm just trying to follow along.
Okay. So I mean, this might look too complicated for some of you. Believe me. I mean, the more you see, it's going to make sense, and you're going to get used to it. Some things are quite peculiar in the way it's done. So now the left side is done. We are going to continue to create a choice on the right side. Now, just for variety, so that I can show you the different options, I made the right side a pick list. So this one is going to be a pick list. And the pick list is going to be public group. And this is going to be data type text. We have to also determine what data type this field is going to capture. And here we have, by the way, we get also the choice here whether multiple options are possible. So this is your multi-select pick list if you choose to use that. And again, we get the drop down of pick list and radio buttons to quickly change if we don't like the way it looks. And now when I go to my choice resources, I see actually the user record choice set here as well. So if I have previously created multiple record choice sets or static choices, I'll see those as options that I can select from. Now I want to create another one here. This is going to be, again, a record choice set. And let's call this one group record choice set. An API name, so the blanks are not going to be allowed out this way. Let's do it this way. And the object is going to be group. And I'm trying to remember what did I do, because there are different types of groups. Yeah, type equals, I think it was called regular. The public groups are called regular. As you can see here, your role groups and all the other sharing stuff is also available here. If you are doing role-based sharing, if you are doing sharing based on any types of other groups, they are all in your queue. So I think the public group is the regular group. So I just want to see those. I don't care about the sorting. I can display the way it comes. The choice labels are going to be group name and I want to capture the group ID as the value that I want to use later. And I don't want to store more group field values. Done. So this one is done. Left side user, right side public group. So let's save this flow. When you're working on flows and you start your flow, you actually don't have an option to save immediately. You need to kind of start building something. And then as you build, I recommend you actually save early and save often, because sometimes, although it happens rarely lately, it just goes a little bit wild, and sometimes you cannot save stuff, and it gets locked up. Like the early days of Microsoft Word, you kind of want to save a bunch of versions. So let's call this one user assignment Screenflow. And then you get also other options here. This is where I mentioned, like you can actually decide to run your flow using system context with or without sharing, which means when a user runs this flow inside your org, anywhere you choose to deploy it, it is not going to care who runs the flow. I mean, it gives the flow superpowers, which you want to be careful about, by the way. And there are also some other options here that we're not going to change for now. So this selection screen is complete. Now we can start debugging our flow. So when we start debugging our flow, and we can see now that the left side works and displays the options as we designed, and the right side works as well. But when I do choose something here and I want to advance, because there is no other element inside the flow, this becomes automatically finish. If there was another screen, then that would have been titled next. And it is not going to do anything other than the selection. So I can see here on the right side in my debug that the user selected these two options, and I captured and saved temporarily the ID values that I want to use, but it's not going to do anything after. So then next, what I want to do is I want to create a record with these values. So there is a create records element. Let's call this one create group shape. And I want to create just one. I can create multiple in other cases, and I can use all values from a record, or I can use separate resources and decide to assign field values individually. And I need to choose which object I want to create a record for. And I think, which one was that? Group member record. I want to create a group member record. There is another one called collaboration group member. That's not what I want right now. And I can now choose fields individually, and there are only just two fields. So this is a joint object that joins the group and the user. So I'm going to assign to the group ID the field of the record will be on the left side. You can see from the arrow the value on the right side. And when I go to my available variables that are either created by me or automatically created by Salesforce, I can see that there is a screen component here that's called public group. I named that screen component, and that pick list value is saved for me over there temporarily to be used by Salesforce. So I can use that one and assign the public group selection value to group ID. And I'll do the same here for user. Again, under screen components, I have a user, and done. So that should do it. Save and debug. So this time around, let me just walk you through the couple of options that we get over here. Now, we want to run the latest version of each flow called by subflow elements. We don't have subflows here, so that's not going to apply. This is just, what it says, but it's not important for this use case. And then show details of what's executed and render flow in Lightning runtime. You want to keep that selected. You can decide to run flow as another user. This is an option that came again in one of the recent releases. If it matters who runs the flow and then the outcome changes accordingly, you can actually search users and run the debug in that context. And if you marked any variables as input variables, they'll show up here, and you can actually assign a value to those input variables. We don't have one here, so run, and I'm going to assign Harvey then to Gators, and next, and it says create records element says, okay, I'm creating a record and the value is Gators. You always want to check here whether the value that you're assigning is null or not. I can see that the value is Gators and Harvey Dent, and record is ready to be created. And then the record has been created, and this should be the record ID that's created. Transaction committed, no errors, and I think we're fine. So we can check that. Let's see in our setup. Let's do a test with Jaguars. So Jaguars has end-to-end integration user, and let us, I have too many screens open now. Let me just close these. I think we were here. Yeah, this is the flow that we were working on. So if I run this one again, and I add Harvey then to Jaguars, I have a transaction committed message, and I can refresh the screen. Yeah, now we have also Harvey in that public group. Any questions?
Nope, just trying to follow along, making sure we're getting all of it.
Okay. So I want to show you one more thing about your deployment options. Where can you deploy your flows? We looked at the account option, right? We can deploy our flow on the account record page. There's actually a powerful option with the development of Lightning pages, like in the applications, that I like to use quite a bit. What we can do now is we can also add flows to our Lightning app as a component. So we have the add to public group flow, and we want to add this to our account Lightning page. What we would do is we would go to the app builder, and then on the left panel, choose flow, drag it down, and I usually put this over here. And I can choose a flow. It has to be an active Screenflow. And this is the one that's active. You want to use the one we've created? Which one is the one we've created? Oh, maybe that one is not active yet. Okay, let's use the one I've created before. User group assignment Screenflow. You can decide whether this should run and display one column or two columns. It may depend. And that's another cool thing. You can have a component visibility that comes with your Lightning app builder to show this flow running on your Lightning page for some users, and even depending on field values. Like if an account is let's say above a certain threshold, large account or something like that belongs to this person, whatever. So you can actually, there are things that are available to you where you can add filters to your component visibility. And if your flow has a variable input defined, if it's expecting some kind of input as a variable, like it could take in, for example, the current record ID, then you are going to see that option here as well. So you can pass the current record ID to your flow to be processed. That's not what we're doing here, so you don't see that here. So if I go to save, I guess I don't need to reactivate, right? No. So let me see if I'm going to see that here. Yeah, I see that the flow is displayed on the upper right-hand side. Now, the good thing and the dangerous thing about this flow displaying and launching, auto-launching on the upper right-hand side is that, it's readily available whenever you pull up the record. That's the good part. The interesting, the dangerous part, or the part that you want to be watching for, is if you're doing something complicated. If you're querying a large number of records, and if you're doing like create or update DML operations before you display the first screen, then this is going to run every time somebody pulls up an account record in your org. So you want to be careful with that. What I usually do here is I put a static screen, just a static screen. It says, like, for example, it sometimes displays information. It'll say, like, well, this account does not have the upsell opportunity field assigned or something, or this account does not have a phone number. Would you like to update or something? And then when the user clicks next, I'll start processing. Right now, this is not really a high impact operation. I don't think it is going to impact a lot of things, but we can do this operation right here, assign the security user, integration user to one of the groups, and then you are going to say, see, thank you over here. And another way you can do this here, if you have a tabbed layout in your console, when we're talking about, well, when this part, or if we go to our sales console, Where's my Sales Console? It's right here. In this format, you can also choose to, yeah, we had the similar tabs over on the other side as well, actually. So you can actually choose to add your flow to a different tab as well. So if you don't want your flow to run and show that dialogue immediately when somebody pulls up the record, then you can add your flow to one of the other tabs. That's also an option. Any questions? Yeah.
Previously you had said that at times, if there's a lot on the initial screen, you will put text and then you will launch from there. Will you launch from there as a URL to the flow, or can you create a button in the UI to do that without code?
Oh, okay. Let me just explain what I mean. No, it's actually I do it right inside the flow. So let me just show you. We can do that right now. Refresh the screen. So this is the one that we've been working with. Let's modify this one. And when you're working with flows, you create a bunch of different versions. It's always a good idea to start with view details and versions rather than clicking directly on the flow. Then you are able to see all the different versions you have and which one is active, which one is not active. Sometimes, rarely, I wouldn't do it that way, but sometimes your latest version is not active. And you know that you can see all that here, and then you can open from there. So I want to save this one as a new version. I don't want to lose this, but I'm going to, this is what I mean. I'm going to add just a simple screen here, because here, this is what happens when I run this, I debug this flow. By the time the first screen shows, the flow already queried the user records and the public group records so that the flow can show me this, right? So, I mean, it's not a huge impact, but if I'm querying large number of records and, you know, that's going to be a performance impact, what I can do is I can add just a simple screen saying, let's hide this header and I'm going to call this one intro screen. And I'm going to add a display text, simple display text component here, intro text. And I'll say if you want to add the group, please proceed, for example. It's as simple as that. I mean, and I'll say done, save, activate. Now what's going to happen is the flow is going to run automatically. Whenever it runs, it's just going to stop right here until I click next. So if I have 1,000 users pulling each 1,000 records a day, then, you know, it's just as simple as running this flow and just holding, pausing right here. So it has no performance impact at all. That's what I meant.
Can you launch that from a community also in the same manner?
Yeah. The way you add flows to communities, it's actually super simple. It's exactly like I showed you on the Lightning App Builder. So you'll just drag a flow component from the left side, drop it on your page, and it'll auto run. It'll auto run whenever that page is pulled. And you'll see I have examples on the YouTube channel with communities. There are cool things that you can do with communities.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? There's one more cool thing I want to show you, and this is going to be done with a different example because the use case we have right now doesn't really apply. So you can use Screenflows. It's kind of like a workaround, but it can come in quite handy. You can use Screenflows to process multiple records that you select on in a list view. So here I have multiple accounts displaying on my list view, and there's a field on the account called upsell opportunity. And I want to mark a couple of these accounts with upsell opportunity pick list field value equals yes. So I want to choose Express Logistics and Burlington Textiles, 2 of these. And I have dropped a button here on this list view called Upsell Yes. And when I click on this one, it launches a Screenflow via a URL, and it processes those records. Now, the display you're going to get is not going to be very impressive. So it just launches the flow and then shows you the end screen for the flow. If you have intermediate screens, by the way, if you want to ask the user a couple of different questions and options, you can do that. But this one is done. Thank you. And if I go back to my accounts list view again.
So you don't actually have to hit thank you. It's just going to run regardless.
If you hit thank you, it's just going to run again. Yeah, you don't really have to hit thank you. That's the tricky part. I mean, what I would do in that case is I would just remove that button. You can remove that button from the footer. I will just remove that button because the thank you doesn't really do anything. It already ran. So which one did we update? Express, right? Express and Burlington. This is sorted by last modified, and you can see that these records have been updated, and the upsell opportunity has been set to yes. So how do I do that? Let me just show you. You need to obviously have a Screenflow that's active. That's the one thing you forget initially when you're new on flow. Sometimes you forget to activate your flow. That's the one thing that you need to try and remember. Sometimes you just bang your head against the wall like for days saying, why doesn't this work? It's not activated. So what you need for that is, because we are going to run this flow via URL, let me just close my two of the screens again. You want to go to your flow list view and account upsell yes bulk screen flow is the flow that I have created to do this, and it's active. I want to go to the view details and versions screen, and I want to capture the URL for this flow. And the URL is flow /flow/account underscore upsell, blah, blah, blah. So you need to copy this one, right? And where do I want to deploy this? I want to deploy this on the account object list view. Well, this is a little bit counterintuitive the way this is done. It has interesting stuff in here. So you go to your button links and actions, and see here, upsell yes bulk. That's the one I have created. So it's a list button that runs via URL. So what you would do is here, you would create a new button link, and you would call this one upsell yes Houston, some different. And list button, this is going to be a list button. Display checkboxes for multi-record selection, yes. Display in existing window with sidebar. You have a couple of options here, but just leave it as it is. Content sources URL, and you just simply drop this URL, you drop this value that you have just pasted, the API name, including the /flow/ in here. And then you save this. And you get this message here. It says, a new custom list button will not be displayed to users until you add it to the search layout. Yeah, that's the part that's tricky. You got to remember that. And what you need to remember also is, this is the thing that's weird about this. So you need to add it to your search layout for Salesforce Classic and search layout, both. So you go here, and then you have your list view that shows all these buttons that are going to be displayed. You see upsell yes is here. You go to your edit, and then you'll see under available buttons that are not selected to be displayed on your list view, you have the upsell yes Houston. You got to move it over, save, and then go to your search layouts. And then again, on your default search layout view, you have upsell yes Houston available on the left side. You move it over to the right and save. Now, when you go to your accounts list view and you refresh here, it should be right here. Yes, we have upsell yes Houston. Any questions so far on how we deploy this? Yeah, I have not shown you yet what the flow does though. Let me just show you that, because this is a little bit different. Remember, this flow does multiple records, so it needs to loop. And this is done here. Account upsell, yes, bulk Screenflow. So it's actually very simple. The flow itself is very simple, but the whole looping concept is difficult for many people. First, we got to understand here that we are dealing with a collection of records, right? It's not only one record, because I could have selected 2, 3, 1 even, however many records I want to select. And all these records are going to come over here. And the way it is passed here, this is something that you need to remember. You just call your collection variable IDs, and those IDs are passed to this ID collection variable. Let's take a moment so that I can explain to you. Well, I don't actually monitor the chat window. Do we have any questions there? No.
I haven't seen any.
All right. So let me just show you one thing that I have created for the course. This is the way I explain my variables. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
I can see it. That's funny because Jen Lee does Tupperware.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I do it with my utensils. So here, when we're talking about the variable, a variable is a container that holds values of certain types. So our variables can be text variables, number variables, and all kinds of different Boolean variables, pick list variables. That's going to define what we can hold in that container. So in this case, this container is a container for a spoon. So we can't really keep a fork in it, but it is going to keep for us a spoon. That spoon can be green, red, yellow, but it's going to be a spoon. And the variable could be also empty. No, if it's empty, there's nothing in it. But if there is something in it, it's going to be a spoon of a certain color. And when we create our variable inside Flow, we get a checkbox right inside the variable definition that says, is this going to be a collection? You want to keep multiple values in this variable. Then if I choose that, then I get a collection variable. That is going to create for me multiple containers of the same type. So if I create a collection of text variables, then I need to keep text in it. They could be different texts. So my spoons, I'm going to have 1 through n number of spoons that I can keep in these same type of containers. They can be green, red, orange, black, but they are going to have to be spoons. Now, record variables keep complete record values in them. So it's kind of like your utensil tray inside your drawer in the kitchen. So it has a container for a spoon, a container for a fork, knife, and so on. And you can keep different values, obviously, that fit the type that you have defined for that, let's say, subcontainer in them. And you can, when you're defining your record variable, obviously you have to select which object that record variable is for. So if you define it for a contact, it's going to keep the contact record for me, for Becca, for another person, and that's going to be the values that's assigned in that one record variable. There will be one contact record in one record variable. And when I'm, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and then you have to have our variables defined for the record variable, which variables it's going to collect on each person from that object.
Well,
like what our spoon is, what our knife is.
No, you don't need to define anything. In fact, when
It
you
just grabs everything.
Yeah, you just tell Salesforce, you know what, this record variable is of type contact, and you know Salesforce what fields are in contact. I told you already. So you just create a copy of that for me to hold these values, right? So there are some dialogues where you can tell Salesforce, you know what, when I'm grabbing this contact record, I just want to keep in my memory the 2 fields that I need. There is a dialog that facilitates that, but that's lost its importance tremendously, because now we have an option that says, let Salesforce do that for me. So when you choose that, Salesforce decides whether you are using that value downstream in the flow or not, and then it just keeps those values. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Does that answer your question, Becca?
It does. I think I was remembering I wrote a flow that was saving values from a case. This is weird, from a case to a lead. Seems backwards, but the lead didn't exist, and it was just some randomly orphaned thing that came off the website, and they had a case, but they didn't have a contact or a lead associated with them. So we were creating a lead. So I was checking the contact to see if they existed, and if they didn't, then we went ahead and created a lead. So,
that's right. You can do that. Obviously, if you have record variables or records of different types, but they both have text fields in them, then you can pass the values from one to another, like first name, last name.
exactly.
That's often done. And the record collection variable, again, when you're creating your record variable in the dialog, you get a checkbox. It says, do you want to create multiple? Then if you choose that, then you get 1 through n, however many you are going to use. You are not restricted. You don't tell Salesforce by definition. And it gives you n number of different containers that can hold n number of contacts, for example. And each of these, they are going to, again, have fields and subcontainers of a certain type. They have to hold that value, but that value could change. If it's text, it can say Becca, and in this one, it's going to say Andy, and so on. So let's go back from our detour a little bit how are we doing for time? What time is it?
It is 10:30, 11:30 your time. So
Oh, okay. So let me just wrap up. It's we are nearing the end anyway. Where's my screen? Okay. So here, the reason why we talked about this is we have to create an ID that's available for input. So when I do that, that means this value is going to be passed to the flow to be processed from the outside. And as you can see, when I define this one, I define the type as text. Whenever you're dealing with record IDs, the type of variable that you want to keep these in is going to be text. And I'm going to allow multiple values. So this is a collection, right? So then I create a loop element, and I need to tell the loop element what to loop on. And this is going to be the collection variable of IDs. I don't care about the sequence, so I left that alone. And then inside the loop, if I drop an element inside the loop, I say for each item, do an update record. And when I'm doing this, I can say, I want to update the account object record where the ID equals, and Salesforce gives me this option here. I can select the current item from the loop. This is automatically created, current item from the loop accounts. And I want to set the upsell opportunity yes. And once Salesforce loops through all the records here and everything is updated, it's going to display a screen. By the way, I can just skip this as well, but I just wanted to show this to make sure that the transaction completed successfully and it can be displayed to the user. And here, like I told you before, we can actually hide the footer. So then it'll be just a success message in that case. Any questions?
I don't have any. I think loops are actually making more sense to me now.
Yeah, loops are one of the more difficult concepts inside flows. But once you get used to them, there are certain peculiar ways. You gotta learn how to pick the current item in the loop and that kind of stuff. Once you learn how to do that, it's not that big of a deal. The difficult part about testing this, though, this type of flow where you actually receive a collection as an input, then when you go to debug, you cannot really feed an input variable that's a collection in the debug in here. So that's why you can't really test this one here.
Sandbox.
Yeah, that's the one difficult part. But you don't usually deploy these on a list view like this. So you usually have a collection of records that you have queried or whatever, you loop through them. Then you can debug those, no problem. Okay. Cool. So that's all. Any questions?
No, I think people are starting to drop. So I don't know if we want to go ahead and do the drawing.
Yes, let's do that.
There is one person on an iPhone and I don't know who you are. If you want to pop in and tell me, I can add you really quick. It just says iPhone in my chat. So, okay, well, I guess I don't have to. So here's.
So we are going to give one free access for my Udemy course now.
Let me share my screen.